Hello and welcome to Paradigm Playbook, a podcast for entrepreneurs in the business of sports. Your hosts, Dave Kozak and Steve Cook, are business owners, successful entrepreneurs, sports enthusiasts, avid readers, and longtime friends. For years, they've read every business book on the market and built successful companies with what they've learned. This podcast will give you the critical takeaways in just 15 minutes a week. It's a quick and easy playbook for building a winning sports business. And now, here are your hosts, Dave and Steve.
We appreciate your feedback. If you enjoyed the podcast, please leave a review. If not, we'd still love to hear from you so we can improve.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Paradigm Playbook's podcast. I'm your host, Dave Kozak, alongside my co-host, Mr. Steve Cook.
Morning, David.
Sir. As always, the color man in the background, Mr. Niall Cummins.
Morning, happy Wednesday.
All right. So last week, we talked about discipline, I think was the ultimate kind of thread in that conversation.
You kind of get off on a tangent about our workouts, but
yeah, hey, that's part of discipline, right? And so what we want to do this week is kind of transition that into work disciplines and the things that you do and the seriousness that you bring to the table and in your work environment, right? And so, Steve, I have a concept that I've expanded on for years now, which is this idea of fake it till you make it, right? And I don't like the expression fake it till you make it. But if you can extrapolate some real important parts of that, I think it helps to have the work discipline conversation. So when I say fake it till you make it, what I'm really saying to people is take yourself seriously in whatever your pursuit is, right? And in the entrepreneurial world in general, if you are choosing to invest your time, energy, effort, and money into a business, you better take that business seriously. Doesn't mean you can't have fun. It doesn't mean you can't have a good culture, but you take it seriously. And so I did a leadership training conference with a bunch of other CEOs of companies in September. And it was an absolutely unbelievable experience. We met at the Antrim Hotel in Tallytown, Maryland, which is 20 miles south of Gettysburg. And the entire leadership conference was based on the Battle of Gettysburg in the Civil War. Unbelievable.
Cool.
It was the coolest experience I've had. I get goosebumps thinking about it right now. And what this gentleman did, a brilliant guy. He was a corporate trainer. But he created these leadership training conferences around different battles. He does one at Gettysburg. He's got one at Fort Sumter. He's done them in Normandy. He's done all over the place, right? And he extracts from the battle environment the history and the leadership stuff that happens in the moment when you're at war, which is the most, grueling of times to be in leadership and make decisions, right? Because it's life or death. And so in this leadership environment, he's teaching about like what Stonewall Jackson had done and what Robert E. Lee was doing and then what the North was doing and what, how all of this was coming together. And the reason I'm bringing this conference up is because taking yourself seriously, right? When you're put in a situation of a paramount seriousness, right, at a battle, and you start taking the lessons and applying them to your business, you get a whole lot more serious about things. You start really thinking about it. And one of the takeaways that came out of there for me was this idea, and I could get deep into the battle. He taught the lessons of the battle. He taught the ranking of leadership and who was in decision making and how communication failed and how there was agendas that were missing and things like that. But when I left there, I had to write down what my step was in going back to work and what I was going to do in my company. And one of the big takeaways for me was never have a meeting without an agenda. Mm-hmm. Never have a legitimate thing that you're going to talk about without a systematic agenda to the things. And that agenda could be 1, it could be 10, it could be 15 things, but have the agenda. And circulate the agenda prior to the meeting to give people time to prep to make sure that it is a very productive meeting. And so what we had gotten into the habit of doing here was we would have meetings, and the meetings would turn to brainstorm. And when your meeting turns to brainstorm, unless it is a brainstorming meeting where that is the intention of it, you don't make progress. You bring more ideas, more options, more decisions to the table. You're identifying things that you may like, you want to, or you could do. So getting back to taking yourself seriously, one of the things that I'm responsible for here is all of the meetings that occur internally are usually at my demand. Right? Now, teams will meet and do things, but they're typically very specific to projects. But when we're putting out large initiatives, it's my responsibility. And so I wasn't really taking my responsibility seriously, nor was I empowering those around me to take their responsibility seriously. And so in taking yourself seriously, whether you're a receptionist or whether you're a CEO or whether you're a sales leader or manager, number one, it's valuing your time, right? What is my time worth and how much time do I need to spend on each of these things is taking yourself seriously. In sales, taking yourself seriously is ensuring that the client or the prospect knows, like, this is what I do. This is why it's a fit. This is what you should do. And here's the timetable with which you should do it, right? Not saying, hey, I worked this up for you. Here, take a look. Let me know when you're ready, right? No. Hey, I gave you what I think is the best possible quote I can get to. It is time stamped. I need a decision by the end of the week so that I can process the order and deliver whatever it is you're ordering within the timetable agreed upon. That's a serious deal, right? So I'll break there. But fake it till you make it is taking yourself seriously in the role, no matter what the role is, and valuing your time, I think, is the first step in doing that.
So I'll spin off of fake it till you make it. But before we do that, you brought into the idea of war and battlegrounds, and give our co-host here, Niall, a chance to drop a book title that he's currently reading, because it takes some lessons to be learned. So you want to tell us about the book you're reading?
Sure, Steve. I'd love to tell us about the book. It's 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene.
And Robert Greene goes into, how great leaders from Alexander the Great, so, their battle planning and everything else that they do, but it all ties in. So, like, you don't like the term fake it till you make it. The one that annoys me is you got to have work-life balance. So this annoys me, and before everybody gets mad at me, I'll explain myself, because I think there's a lot of things in personal life, and I'm not telling anybody to neglect their children or their wife or anything else, but it's not a matter of balance. I think life-work balance has something that has happened over the years. So if you go back into the, agricultural era before the Industrial Revolution, and people worked from sun up to sundown, and that was it. They didn't rush home to see a television show. They didn't take an hour break for lunch. They did what they needed to do, and that's how they do it. And as an entrepreneur, I think you have to get away from the norms of what society is telling you should do. And we're going to be faced with a big one coming up here soon, Dave, because there's a lot of people pushing a 4-day work week. Mm-hmm. And, I'm not comfortable, so like I basically have a 7-day work week. But it's not because I'm forced to do it. It's because I like to do it, and it's part of my discipline. And I don't think I neglect my children or my wife or anybody else to do it. It's how you build that. So, when I just recently got approached, and we do, personal coaching and work with people. And they said to me, well, you're going to coach me, life coach or business coach? I said, well, you don't do one without the other. So when I do business coaching, one of the things, not to get back on fitness, but that's what I'm going to say, you know what, you're going to be a better businessman if you're in shape. So let's get that fixed right now. Let's get you in shape and do the work. And if you have to get up an hour early, or you have to miss an hour, or be more productive, or cut your lunch break to 15 minutes, I don't really care, but you're not going to do one without the other. So that discipline has to be in place so that you don't have to talk about life work balance. To me is, I'm going to work late this week, so I'll go in late tomorrow. You know, I just can't buy into that.
No, I agree.
But I think that ties to what you're saying about taking yourself seriously. And that's the whole being of yourself you have to take seriously. Your health and well-being and your family all blends into that. So part of a discipline of an entrepreneur is making sure that those around you are supportive of what you're going to do and they understand why you're doing it. The other term that I hate, that we went through an era when people used to use it as a pride thing, is, well, he's a workaholic.
Mm-hmm.
And that just annoys me so much. And because you work harder, you're dedicated to your business, doesn't mean you have an ailment. It means you have a dedication.
Agreed. And a discipline and a desire for success. And so that, I think they're great points of like where the mentality, let's put it this way. I'll draw it on a line in the sand right now. You're not an entrepreneur if you've got those two concerns. If being a workaholic is a problem for you, and if establishing work-life balance, that's not an entrepreneurial mindset. Because, and I say this all the time to people, you're going to spend how much time every day at work? More time at work than you spend anywhere else.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
By far.
More time.
Yeah.
So it becomes the habit. It becomes a part of you. It should be a part of you. It is what you do, right? Now, it's not what defines you, right? It doesn't mean that that's the definition of you, but if you're going to spend time there, you better figure out how to make it something important. And if you're worried about being too involved in your own business, that would be like if someone was asking me, should I take the entrepreneurial leap? And they said, well, I'm really concerned about work-life balance and I don't want to become a workaholic. Like, don't do it, because.
Right. And I think it doesn't mean that you can never transition from being an entrepreneur to being an owner, but they're not the same thing. You can
Correct.
own a business without being an entrepreneur. Entrepreneur, in my mind at least, means you're working on the business and in the business, and you're fully involved and invested in the success of that business, not that you're just taking an owner's paycheck.
Yeah, and ultimately, if you are trying to take an owner's paycheck, just buy stock at some company that you believe in, right? That's the same thing. If you are an entrepreneur, your goal is to get to that point where you are working on the business all the time, right? That is we're a technician, we're a manager, and then we're the entrepreneur. And that shifts over time. It shifts with a good construction. It shifts with discipline, hard work, and an effort to get there. And it may take 5 years. It may take 10 years. It may take 20 years, right? But you're like my kids, they come to this office. They know we own the office. They come in and they draw on my whiteboard and they enjoy it. It's part of my family. Matter of fact, I'm hosting a party here for my kids' baseball team out back with lights and a t-ball court or a wiffle ball court set up. Like,
nice.
And we hosted one. So like the idea that I'm at the office working, and I want to relate back to a story about my dad, because this is where I got my work ethic. And we'll talk about work ethic, because work ethic is a discipline. And unfortunately, work ethic became that toxic thing, workaholic, that was created, which I think is just an atrocious term. But
before you go into that story, just one thing that you reminded me of, if you don't understand the difference between entrepreneur and owner, if you look at an entrepreneur, what they do after they go into ownership and they're not needed in that business, the one thing that most all of them do, from Elon Musk to everyone else, is they start a new business.
Start another business all day.
And it's like, in my own life, I've been through this 3 times, and people say, I thought you retired. And I did. And we started Paradigm Playbook. I announced my retirement a year in, and we had already started Paradigm Playbook, which is now becoming, all consuming, which is great. I love it.
So I wrote this intro chapter to the book that we're going to write. and I wrote it on where I learned like the two most valuable lessons I learned. And my dad was an attorney, a very hardworking attorney, worked in corporate America. And, you know, I remember as a kid, he'd get up, he'd either drive us to school if that was his responsibility, or we'd take the bus, but he'd go into work, you know, 7:30, he'd be at work before most people in corporate America would get to work. He would work, and then as we grew, we would have sporting events, and he would always be at our sporting events, right? So he'd leave the office at 3:00 and he'd meet us at our high school and he'd watch the sporting event. And then he would go back to his office and he'd put in another couple hours, and then he'd come home and we'd all have family dinner, and, you know, we'd do homework, and he would go down and he would work at he had a radial arm saw. And if you're not familiar with a radial arm saw, it's a saw with an arm that sticks out, and you pull the saw and it can do miter cut, do all kinds of different cuts. And it was a very versatile tool. But on a radial arm saw, you can swing the radial arm to the side and there's a big workbench. And he would open up his legal binders, and that's where he would do his work. He didn't have an office. Mm-hmm. He just worked at his radial arm saw, and he'd work until, you know, 9:45, and then he'd come up, and they typically at the time, the 10:00 p.m. TV shows were hour-long shows, like the ER was one of them. I remember that they used to watch, and so he'd typically watch an hour of TV, and then he'd roll out to bed. My mom, on the other hand, didn't work but volunteered for everything. And between my dad's work ethic and my mom's volunteerism, we were involved in all things all the time, and we got opportunities to do all kinds of things. And so I combine the two of them in the volunteer, which I equate to be available, willing, and out there, and opportunity will present itself. When you volunteer, opportunities present themselves. Mm-hmm. And then if you have the discipline of hard work, opportunity presents itself. You work hard at it and it pays dividends. And so all of a sudden I combine those two into my mentality. I'm always trying to get involved. I'm always trying to volunteer. I'm always trying to be into something. And then I work hard at what it is, and boom, you create this entrepreneurial success, right? So I think it's just a great thing. And I didn't turn around and look at my dad retired at 58. Was he a workaholic? If workaholic is the best example you can set for hardworking individual, then yeah, I guess by all accounts he is.
Do you want your business to thrive? Visit us at paradigmplaybook.com and contact us today for expert assistance.
Yeah, there's a section in Phil Knight's book, The Shoe Dog. I think that's the name of his book, The Shoe Dog. But Phil Knight, you know, when asked in an interview, you know, if he thought he was lucky because he came out with the right shoe at the right time, and he said, you know, absolutely. But everybody that's lucky has two things in common. They're present and aware, and they take advantage of it. And so, you know, and we all, you know, we don't all, but, you know, the thing that your father had that set an example for you was that you can do it all. You can be a good father, a good businessman, you know, and he picked a particularly hard career that, you know, takes hours and hours of study, more so than we do. And then we that are in the sports world want to complain because we were at the gym for 2 extra hours. I mean, seriously. So I'm different than you. I grew up, my father was the program director at a YMCA. Well, you know, I would always like to go meet Dad at work because Dad had a gym and a pool. I mean, it was great. And it was like, Dad, you can work a couple extra hours. I'm going to stay here and play. So, but yeah, I think, you know, we're lucky entrepreneurs that you're in the business that you want to be in. So it shouldn't be difficult to create the discipline to make that a success.
And I want to come back to the discipline concept here in business. There's another thing that is said that I despise, which is if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. Yeah. That is an absolute joke.
Yeah.
I love what I do. Make no questions about it. But man, some days are harder than others. Some days I don't want to do it. I'd rather be golfing. I'd rather be fishing. I'd rather be vacationing, traveling the world, kayaking. I could list out 1,000 things I'd rather be doing sometimes. Mm-hmm. But discipline to do the work that I love doing proves to provide significantly more satisfaction. And so if you love what you do, you will be satisfied. Not, you will never work a day in your life.
Yeah. So when you put in that incredibly hard day as an entrepreneur, I think you're more proud than upset. I mean, it's like they always say when, your kid hits his first line drive that breaks a window, or you're more proud or upset, and it's like, dad's pretty proud that he hit and broke that window. So I think that's it. If we can spin off to one concept of business that I see overlooked all the time, and that's the sales side of business, and not all businesses, but in the business that we're affiliated with, these sports businesses, I think people have a fair amount of success, and we forget that you have to always be selling. And it's nothing more than, and I chose sales early on, and it took nothing more than discipline to be a success. I didn't have to be smart. I didn't have to have the best line of products. I just had to be disciplined to do the numbers. And I was lucky in, like one of the first speakers I ever heard was Zig Ziglar. And if you haven't heard Zig Ziglar, it's a hoot. And I will tell you, that's a book you want to listen to before you read, just because it's in his Southern draw accent, and it's awesome. But the discipline is knowing, and you said it earlier, how many calls you have to make to get how many appointments you need to close the number of sales that you're, that's acceptable to you. So it goes back to the discipline. And
I want to add something there too, because that's where you start.
Right.
And then you sharpen your tool, and then you get better. And all of a sudden that same amount of calls provides you significantly more income because you closed more percentage of deals. But you still, if you run the discipline at the front of, I'm going to make 30 calls, or I'm going to make 50 calls, or whatever it is. My numbers were 250 a week equals 30 contacts equals 15 PQBs equals 5 deals. And the better I got, the 250 would lead to 15 deals, lead to 20 deals. And it just, so that's the baseline, right? I'm not saying don't sharpen your skills, don't get better. We're saying do that. But if you create the discipline of the activity, it's going to provide dividends.
I'll add, one more look at this. And this is a lesson I learned from my daughter, who's a pretty decent distance runner, but has done, many, triathlons. And she was more of a runner than a biker, and an adequate swimmer, but still a runner at heart. And she's looking to break a certain time. I forget what it was. And I said, which of the three do you have the most likely chance of improving? And she said, none of them. It's the transition time. And so that's a discipline that salespeople don't have, because we spend an inordinate amount of time complaining about a lost sale or celebrating a gain sale. And never would I tell a story with my daughter and the Wolf of Wall Street in the same story, but I'm going to do that. Like I would never do that. But so in the Wolf of Wall Street, if you remember, one of the opening scenes was he was eliminating the transition time, which was hanging up the phone and picking it up. So that's all you're going to take out. It's when it clicks, then you start dialing the next number. And so they actually put a button on phones back then that would hang up and give you a dial tone right away, so you could do it that fast, so you could keep going. But it's the discipline of getting rid of the unnecessary in business, and we all have that. It's the first 10 minutes of your meeting. Hey, how was your day? And it's like, it's okay to do that, but don't call that part of the meeting. Cut the meeting to 45 minutes, and then let everybody have their water cooler time.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. There was a comment. Where was I going? I think the part to me that really makes the entrepreneurial discipline a thing is, in every single day, I don't have enough time, right? Mm-hmm. I don't. And as an entrepreneur, you won't either, right? time freedom or money freedom is what we all work for in some capacity or another, right? You can relate something. I want to buy something, that's money freedom. Oh, I want to be able to go do something, it's time freedom, or money and time, right? But you won't have enough time in the day. So I think the final thing here is prioritization, right?
Mm-hmm.
Discipline and prioritization, right? You can spend an awful lot of time working on the thing that doesn't matter. And so that's a discipline issue, but it's also a priority issue. And so going back to where we started this conversation with the agendas, for me, it was realizing that I had I needed to put some significant time and thought into what I was trying to accomplish in every single meeting, because what would happen is the meeting would go outward, and we'd be talking about this thing, and then all of a sudden we're talking about this thing, and then we're talking about this thing, and then now we're talking about 3 months down the road when I need to get this solution for the next 48 hours or whatever it is. And so being able to prioritize what matters is important. And in a organized, disciplined business, you have to abide by the calendar, right? And the schedule. You have to understand what time it's going to take to do certain things. And I think that was the other thing that was an aha moment for me in the Gettysburg leadership conference. It wasn't just enough that I create the agenda and get it to people. I had to schedule time now for me to conceive the agenda, to think about the desired outcomes that I'm trying to achieve, to write the questions that I need to ask people so that I can make sure we're moving forward in the right direction. So for me, like, I go into a meeting, I know what I'm going to ask people. Well, they don't know what I'm going to ask them. And so now I need to back up, sit down and really think critically so that I can lay out a starting point, right? You don't just drop hey, well, how are we going to do this, right? Here's what I would like to achieve. Here's the timetable I'd like to achieve it. Here's the players involved. All right, now I expect your role to be this. What support do you need? What parameters do you want from me? And then the other thing I always do is I set kind of decision points. So like if you're involved in a project that I'm sort of orchestrating, I don't really want to know what you're doing until there's a decision point. And when you come to me with a decision point, I want the options you think are the best. I want the options that exist. And then we'll make a decision together how to move forward. And in doing that, what I've been able to create is people are able to make decisions more because I'm helping them make the initial decisions. And then they're sort of like, oh, well, Dave thinks this way, so this is what he'll want. And then they come to me and it's a more fluid system.
I think if people buy into taking on new responsibilities too easily, they feel it's an indication that they had free time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think one of the key questions is, here's what I want to do. I want to add this to your schedule. What do you think you're going to have to give up to get this done?
Yeah, no, brilliant.
What's the one thing that you have to stop doing right now to make time for this? And then we'll decide. So it goes back to managing priorities. And if you look at all the books that have been written on time management, and it's really priority management that is at the crux of everything that you do, especially as an entrepreneur. We all have the same number of hours. It's like I'm trying to do a podcast once a week, and Jeff Bezos is running 282 different companies. So it's like same number of hours. So it's, I think we can all become more disciplined, and that gives you more time to do what you want. So never think that Dave or I are saying, and believe, we work hard, but we have a lot of fun in life. And we're not telling anybody to give up that portion of their life. And we're not telling them that it's a balance. It doesn't mean if you go play golf, you've got to work an extra day. We're not saying that. You should be able to go play golf.
100%.
And keep working.
I coach 3 sports teams, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I get home and my kids go to bed, do I always go to bed? No. Yeah. Sometimes I'm back at my desk doing what I need to do to get done or prep for the next day or prep for the meetings, right? It's the idea that you're never that far removed from your business, right? I deal with a lot of people that are headed towards retirement. And one of the things that I hear all the time is, well, I don't know what I would do. And I think to myself, man, I'm just never going to have that problem. Not because I have so many outside activities that I want to do, but my hobby is my business.
Right.
I get to stay involved. Can I throttle to 2 days a week? Hopefully that's the goal, right? I want to be able to work Tuesdays and Thursdays and make sure that my people are taken care of and make sure that when it comes to decisions that I need to make, I'm there to make those decisions for them. But, I may leave at 3:00 one day and be right back on my computer at 8:00 at night doing a client appointment and then stay up until midnight to do what I need to do and start all over again. So
I think it's one of the reasons that athletes have trouble retiring, Dave, is because when you walk away from a job, if it's something you hate, okay, it's easy to retire. But an athlete walks away from the greatest thrills of their life. So it's very hard to retire. Well, with a true entrepreneur, it's the same thing. And for me, it was the same thing. I've started several different businesses. I've sold some, retired from some, worked corporate, did all kinds of things. But in the end, I never left to get away from something. I left to go to something, which is why I've created new businesses and why, I'm like you. I probably won't ever retire. I'll be lowered into the ground with a finger up saying, I got one more idea.
One more thing I want to do here.
Yeah. So it's, but I think the discipline, and I'll go back to what I said earlier, is how you do one thing is how you do everything. So if you do it with discipline,
and I'll say
it,
I'll say it how I say to my 12-year-old softball team, my 10-year-old baseball team, the 4th grade football team. How you practice is how you play.
Yep, absolutely.
Right.
So that's great discipline. Applied it. Again, we could apply it to the marketing side. We could apply it to the, HR side, any part of the business. But you have to have core values and you have to have disciplines to stand by what you believe in and where you want to go.
Absolutely. Just like Vance did when you had to turn down that $500,000 check.
Still hurts.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. It's been Paradigm Playbooks podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard here, please like, subscribe, and share.
Thank you, David. Everybody have a great week.
Are you ready to learn and discover new ideas? We want to hear from you. Share your questions, thoughts, and ideas for the Paradigm Playbook podcast. We value your input and want to create episodes that match your interests. Leave a comment or send us an email at playbook@paradigmplaybook.com.